Okay, so I usually don't do this, but I want to talk about movies. Particularly adaptations of books or video games or anime or anything else that gets a feature film treatment. Um, I was thinking about this and I was like, what makes a good adaptation? And the short answer to me is anything that retains the spirit of the original, still tells the story faithfully, and only changes things as long as it improves or is interesting enough to be changed. Those are really my only criteria for what makes a good adaptation. That said, there are a lot of good adaptations of things. Most people bitch and complain about how film, films are, quote, never as good as the book, unquote. And well, that's largely true in a lot of cases. There's a lot of great film adaptations, and I'm just going to name a few. And hopefully you've seen them, and if not, then I would highly recommend go check them out. So the first I would say would be The Neverending Story is fantastic. The book goes into a lot of other detail, and there's a lot of stuff in the book the movie doesn't cover. But adapting that into a 3-act screenplay, the way they did, actually not only works, but excels at its goal, and is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. So I might be a little biased on that. Another great adaptation, and this one is, again, largely different from its source material, is Akira. The famous anime movie from the 80s. The film version of Akira is basically only covering a small part of the actual manga that it's based on. You gotta understand the manga is over 1,000 pages. It's roughly the size of a telephone book. And this movie has to cover all of that in 2 hours. It streamlines a lot. There's a lot more in the manga, obviously. There's so much more that it doesn't talk about. But it does help that the writer and director of Akira is actually the writer and artist of the manga itself. So you get one of those few adaptations actually done by its author, therefore giving it, things that you can't cry, that's not the author's vision. Well, unfortunately it is, if you don't like it. But in this case, it's not unfortunate because Akira is a kick-ass movie. Which brings me to another adaptation, slightly wildly different. Emma Thompson's Pride and Prejudice, I believe. It's Pride and Prejudice. I'm not a big Jane Austen fan, but what she did with that book turned into a very watchable movie. And the acting in that is that great in that, and a lot of that's due to its direction and acting. Even though I'm not a big Jane Austen fan, I've never cared for Jane Austen that much. I've read some of her stuff. I kind of had to make myself get into it. But that one's actually a really well done adaptation. And I want to kick myself in the ass if it's not actually Pride and Prejudice, or if it's Sense and Sensibility or something else. Either way, it's that big famous one that Emma Thompson wrote and was in. Yeah, that's the one. That's the Jane Austen adaptation I like. Obviously not as familiar with that one as I am Akira or Neverending Story. Another good adaptation, Stephen King's The Shining. Stanley Kubrick's adaptation is fantastic. This is an example of an adaptation that changes a lot, but changes it in ways that improve upon the original work as opposed to detracting or ruining it. King himself ruined The Shining, in my opinion, in a miniseries version that he wrote in the 90s. But it's Kubrick's Shining that, to me, is the definitive horror movie of all time, and also the definitive adaptation of King's novel. I strongly disagree with King's dislike of that movie because I actually think it improved his work. And I think King was looking at it the wrong way as to why he didn't think it was a good adaptation. I don't think he understood where Kubrick was coming from in that, and that's understandable. But anyways, that's just a short little list of adaptations I think are actually just as good in, as if not in some cases better than their source material. And if you haven't seen any of these, I highly recommend checking them out. They're all easily found, they're all available, and you can all buy them online or rent them online. I'm sure you could even rent them all on YouTube. So anyways, thanks for watching. I just kind of want to do something a little different. I largely talk about books, but I kind of wanted to talk about something else. I like other things too, and sometimes I want to talk about other things. I may